Welcome to WMTV with Sir Tony Baldry, former MP, 32 years in the saddle, but you decided to step down at the last election. Not quite sure whether I would have done the same thing myself. Politics just too exciting at the moment. Don't you miss being in Parliament?
I don't think you can be in the House of Commons forever, and I think 32 years, nearly a third of a century, is quite a decent innings.
Right, but just, I mean, in terms of the perspective...
Yeah, I mean, any time you leave the House of Commons, there are always going to be exciting times in politics, but as I say, you just can't be there forever. You know, I don't have any regrets about leaving the House of Commons, and it is interesting now being a spectator and an informed spectator, hopefully.
Right, and do you think that, I mean, just as in the areas you're interested in and your activities, has the post-referendum environment shaped as, you know, sort of mapped out in the way you would have liked?
Yeah, well, I mean, almost all of my life now is doing things in frontier markets, so Middle East, Far East Asia, Africa, exactly the sorts of markets which we're going to need to do well in, and I'm very glad that we now have a Department for International Trade. We have a Secretary of State who's seeking, in Liam Fox, who's seeking to promote international trade. That is all very good news from my perspective. And
what do you think the people that you're meeting in these frontier markets think of what the UK has done? I mean, they sort of thinking, what are these people doing?
I think they see opportunities. I think they see opportunities of closer links with the UK, closer trade deals. So I think, but clearly we can't start to negotiate with them till we have resolved how we are leaving the European Union and our relationship with the rest of Europe, because until we leave Europe, we're not by law allowed or entitled to start to negotiate trade deals with other parts of the world.
But do you think that these business people and investors into the UK, presumably around the world, think we've shot ourselves in the foot? I mean, just
no, I don't think so.
View.
I mean, I think they're still coming to London. I think you're still going to see huge numbers of business people come to London, basing our activities in London for all sorts of reasons. English is a common language. They like London. It's accessible. It's cosmopolitan. They like doing business with the UK.
Great transport facilities as well.
Generally, there are good transport facilities, yeah, and hence why we need a third runway at Heathrow.
That's, I mean, it's become a very problematic issue, a very controversial issue. Isn't it just a storm on a teacup? You know, you have a certain amount of traffic at an airport, you need to build more.
No, I think you, yeah, I mean, you whether you extend the runway or however you deal with it, I mean, you need Heathrow to be a significant hub, and if you don't have Heathrow as a significant hub, you're just going to lose aviation business to Germany or to Schiphol or to Brussels or wherever. You know, having London as a key international airport is important.
Well, speaking of the London's importance, a lot of the scare stories about London and business have been to do with, you know, with a hard Brexit, lots of firms are going to leave. Have they really got anywhere else to go? I mean, they're not really going to go to Paris, and they're not really going to go to Frankfurt, are they?
No, what I think one will see is, as announced with Lloyd's of London last week, they're going to need to have some presence in the EU. So you're going to see some operations, whether it be banks or insurance companies or other entities, wanting to have a physical presence in the European Union. The UK is not going to be in the European Union, so they're going to have some office or some, you know, sub-branch there. I think the number of organisations, the number of businesses that will leave the UK altogether and entirely because we're no longer in the EU will be comparatively small. And one can balance that. I mean, we'll have greater control over tax, and we'll be able to set lower corporation tax, as started with George Osborne, which hopefully will encourage businesses to come to the UK.
Well, that's that's slightly I'm saying amusing, because it's not funny to laugh at these things, but the EU itself, as represented by Jean-Claude Juncker, and his sobriety or level of sobriety, is in a rather precarious state. I mean, it could be the situation that this time next year there isn't actually an EU to have a little office in.
Yeah, well, that's the matter for them. I mean, but we're in the process of. I mean, you know, there's some very straightforward facts. The UK has voted to leave the European Union, so we are now going to have to negotiate how to do that. I think it's been made fairly clear that we can't remain within the single market if we want to have control over our own borders. I think it was pretty clear that a large number of people who voted to leave wanted to have control over our own borders. I think that's fairly well represented on the Conservative benches in the House of Commons. I think the Prime Minister acknowledges that. I think that's been acknowledged in various statements she's made. So what you've essentially now come down to is you have the United Kingdom and you have the European Union, and they are going to have to decide over the next 2 years what is the trading relationship going to be between those two entities, between the fifth largest economy in the world and this trading bloc here. And I don't think it's in either their interest or our interest to have a sort of mutually destructive kind of set of tariff walls, but I can also understand the European Union not wanting to have a situation where they feel that we're getting a better deal outside of the European Union than we might have had inside the European Union. So there are all those nuances. But essentially what you've got is two trading blocs deciding how they're going to trade.
Now, how's that going to end up in a happy way? Because, as you said, I mean, if the UK leaves and it's seen to have had spectacularly beneficial effects, other people in the EU are going to say, "Oh, hang on, actually, the Holland or
But it's not in the interests of BMW or Mercedes or all those European firms and organisations that export goods to the UK for this to end up unhappily. I mean, there's diplomacy and politics is about getting the best out of situations, and it's both in the European Union's interests and our interests to get the best. This is not like the Treaty of Versailles where one side's trying to punish the other side. We are going to continue to trade indefinitely and increasingly, and therefore it's in our mutual interest to get the best deal for both sides.
Speaking of diplomacy, it reminds me of Donald Trump. He's on the other side of the pond. Apparently we're at the front of the queue as far as trade is concerned. Are you optimistic on that?
Yeah, but again, as I say, I think what people have to understand is we can't legally start to negotiate with the United States or with Australia or anywhere else until we have left the European Union, because until we've left the European Union, by law, we're not allowed to start negotiating with anybody else. So it's again in everyone's interest that these negotiations are shorter rather than longer.
Right, finally, I was listening to Radio 4 this morning, as I tend to do to get my bearings on the day, and I think the political editor described Theresa May as a submarine, which is perhaps not the most romantic notion, but apparently that refers to the way that she generally likes to keep quiet, but now and again she will surface and make a pronouncement.
Actually, I mean, I think with respect, John Humphreys and the Today programme are making too much of this. I think the Prime Minister has been very, very clear. She said very, very clearly, first sentence almost that she issued as Prime Minister, Brexit means Brexit, i.e. United Kingdom has voted to leave the European Union. We are going to leave the European Union. Okay, desperately disappointing for those 48% who voted Remain, but if it had been the other way around, if it had been 52, 48, the other way around, then Remain would have expected that to be the end of the story. So she's made it very clear the UK is going to leave the European Union. I think she's also made it very clear that the UK is going to want to have control back over its borders, which thus means the UK is also going to leave the single market. I think she's made that very clear. So the issue then now, the issue simply then is how do those two trading blocs agree to trade forward? I think the Prime Minister has been pretty straightforward on all of this.
And you think by 2020 everything's sorted out, we get on with a new era in British
Yeah, because I can't believe that it's either in the European Union's interest or our interest to drag this out. Of course there may be some second order issues which may drag on for a bit, but I think the basics, the fundamentals, everyone has an interest in sorting out in the next 2 years, sorting out sooner rather than later.
So Tony Baldry, thank you very much.
You're very welcome.